wisdom,
prudentia,
justice,
justitia,
temperance,
temperantia,
courage.
fortitudo.
Applying ancient philosophy to modern life, this is the Sunday Stoic.
This is the Sunday Stoic Podcast. Thank you for joining me for another week. This is Steve. This week we're going to pick up where we left off last time with the early Stoics. We're kind of doing a survey right now of what Stoicism is, who the early founders were, what they believed in, and then we're going to move into the more familiar territory of the Roman Stoics and look at them in a little more detail than we have in the past. I'd like to do a little bit more than just pick a few quotes. Let's put a few people into context, let's talk about them in a little more depth, and learn from their successes and failures as well as their words as we try to live better, more stoic lives. So let's survey a little bit more of the lives of the eminent philosophers, get an idea of what early Stoicism was like, but bear in mind I am not reading very much of what it actually says to you. There's a lot there, and you can check it out yourselves. There's information in the show notes. Now, in the early Stoa, they thought that all three parts, physics, logic, and ethics, were intertwined and dependent upon one another, but Zeno started his course with logic, then physics, and then finally ethics. So you have to learn how to think clearly, learn how the world is thought to work, and then put that together to figure out how you should live within the world. It's kind of interesting because we tend to skip straight to the ethics without the focus on logic, which I am here to tell you all of us could benefit from the study of logic. But that's how Zeno did the school. There's another comment within the lives of the eminent philosophers on where the term impression comes from. We hear that all throughout Epictetus's work, this idea of mental impressions. We hear a noise outside, and the impression is, oh, there's a burglar. But we have to be careful not to assent to impressions without good reason. And it says that an impression is an imprint on the soul. Its name is borrowed from an imprint made on wax by a seal. So much like sealing a letter by stamping it with a seal into wax, when we hear a noise, we kind of get a stamp on our mind, but it's up to us whether or not we let that wax harden and become fact, right? We have to assess it with logic. We have to assess it with our understanding of how the world actually works and what is likely and what is not likely. And the problem we have is we tend to run with that first impression we have and accept it as fact and then become anxious. Zeno was the first in his treatise on the nature of man to designate the goal as life in agreement with nature, or simply put, living agreeably to nature. And this is the same as the virtuous life, virtue being the goal towards which nature guides us. So too Cleanthes, in his treatise on pleasure, also Poseidonus and Hecato, in his work on ends. Again, living virtuously is equivalent to living in accordance with experience of the actual course of nature. As Chrysippus says in his first book of the De Finibus, for our individual natures are parts of nature of the whole universe. And this is why the end may be defined as life in accordance with nature, or in other words, in accordance with our own human nature as well as with that of the universe. All right, so kind of a dense paragraph there, but this kind of gives you the history of the living according to nature thing. Started with Zeno. I've also read that Zeno first started by saying we should live consistently, and meaning, well, you're living stoically every day. Every part of your life is consistent. And then Cleanthes adding in, live consistently with nature. I guess it depends on how you translate things. But we've gone over that many times. One of those common precepts of Stoicism that we should live according to nature, or live consistently according to nature. And we can learn how to live well and what to expect. And we can learn what is up to us and what is not up to us by studying how the world works. Okay, I'm going to move now into a summary of some of the early Stoics, some of their biographies, because I think it's really interesting to see how they differed and how they were similar. And once again, to remind ourselves that Stoicism is not a religion. People who studied with Zeno had way different ideas about how Stoicism should be practiced. So the first student of Zeno that is mentioned is Aristoron, and he kind of leans back towards cynicism, I think. He thought that logic and physics should be scrapped, and ethics was the only thing we should focus on. And he said that all things indifferent should be treated the same way. So no preferred or dispreferred indifference. Everything that's not pertaining to virtue is just an indifferent and should be treated as such. Aurelius sounds like someone who might have been after my own heart. Another student of Zeno thought that scientific knowledge was the goal of life, learning how things work. And he apparently had quite different views of philosophy than Zeno. Dionysus left Stoicism after a while. He was a student for a while, but he had a really bad eye ailment. So his eye hurt really, really bad. It hurt so bad that he gave up the idea that pain was an indifferent. This pain is so bad, I cannot call it an indifferent. And he joined the Cyrenaics. One of their goals in life was to seek a lack of pain. So he quit because of that. Then we get into the next head of the Stoa, Cleanthes. He took over from Zeno. Cleanthes was kind of a cool dude. He's a big guy. He's originally a boxer. And he was really, really poor, so he couldn't just go to the Stoa. It's kind of like going off to college. He couldn't just afford that. He had to work at night and go to school in the day. So he was so poor, he worked nights as a water carrier in a garden. They called him the well lifter, I guess because he's pumping water and lifting water and carrying it around and watering plants, working in this garden of some rich individuals. He was known for being very industrious and very frugal. So he's used by Epictetus as an example of how to live well later on. He's known for living what he preached. In fact, the local government was so impressed with the way he lived his life that they voted to give him a pension. They were going to give him, like $20 a month or whatever to help him survive. But Zeno forbid him to take it. I think Zeno was worried it would ruin him. Cleanthes was so proud of his frugality when people commented on it. He said that Cleanthes could even maintain a second Cleanthes if he liked. Now, Cleanthes was known to be good at the practice of Stoic ethics, but had no knack for physics. And his fellow pupils actually called him an ass because he was said to be mentally slow and not that bright. But he took it as a badge of honor being called an ass. He said that he alone was strong enough to carry the load of Zeno. So Zeno must have been a pretty harsh taskmaster. So he's not the brightest, but he lives the life, and he bore the load of Zeno, I guess. And it's said that he would often find fault with himself. So one day Aristoron heard him yelling at someone, you dirty, no good son of a whatever. And Aristoron says, "Who is that you're talking to? Who are you scolding so?" Cleanthes says, "An old man with gray hair and no wits." So, a little self-depreciation there, self-deprecating humor. It said that he was so poor that he would record Zeno's lectures on the shoulder blades of oxen and oyster shells, and he could not afford pen and paper. But at the death of Zeno, he became head of the Stoic school, until eventually he reached a ripe old age where he had a gum infection. And he was told to go on a fast to allow his gum infection to heal, and he did so. And it healed up pretty quickly, but he said, well, I'm already on the road towards death. I'll just finish the journey. And he starves himself to death. And he dies at the same age that Zeno died. Now, there was a student of Zeno called Spherius. There we go, Spherius. And he made considerable progress in his studies, and he went to work with King Ptolemy of Alexandria, I guess. And they got in an argument as to whether a philosopher could hold an opinion, which we could call assenting to an impression without good evidence. And Spherius says, no, a good, wise person would not assent to an impression without good evidence. So He would not hold any opinions without evidence. So what the king does, the king makes a bunch of wax pomegranates that apparently look really real, and he puts them on a table, and he calls in Spherius, and he says, "Hey, have a look at what's on the table. What is that?" And Spherius goes, "Those are pomegranates." And the king goes, "Aha! You have given your assent to a presentation which is false. Ha ha, I fooled you." And Spherius says, "I assented not to the proposition that they were pomegranates, but rather that there were good reasons to think they were pomegranates. Certainty of presentation and reasonable probability are two totally different things." I actually think it's really important. This is a really important message. This idea of thinking scientifically about things, thinking in terms of probability rather than certainty, avoiding dogma, saying, okay, those are probably pomegranates, not those are pomegranates, right? That's kind of how science works. There is a strong probability that smoking is linked with lung cancer. That's how science presents information, by couching it in probability rather than absolute certainty, because we are not absolutely certain. We're human beings and we're highly fallible. Finally, Chrysippus, a student of Cleanthes, was originally a long-distance runner. And he became a teacher of Stoicism, and he actually added a lot to it and made it far more robust and kind of modernized it. He was excellent at all three branches of philosophy, and he wrote something like 705 or more books. So he really popularized it, made it available to the masses, and allowed it to stick around a while. And just a few comments about the way he lived at wine parties. He used to behave quietly, although he drank a little bit, and he was unsteady on his legs, which caused a woman to say, "As for Chrysippus, only his legs get drunk." So he goes to parties. He doesn't become a loudmouth when he's drinking, but he stumbles around a little bit. So only his legs get tipsy, but he didn't violate any of his rules by babbling on about, drunken nonsense. And it's said of Chrysippus, "But for Chrysippus, there had been no porch." So without him, Stoicism was just kind of an interesting little blip. But he wrote so much about it and really thought about it and crafted the logical aspects of Stoicism and the physics and added to the ethics in such a way that it became very popular. And it's said that he actually died of laughter. You can read about that yourself. Okay, so I can't go on and on with this particular format without becoming terribly boring, but I just thought that was really interesting to get those little snippets of these individuals. Once again, here are Stoics drinking wine at parties occasionally. Here are Stoics thinking that knowledge is one of the reasons that we exist. We should pursue knowledge, but others saying, no, we need to pursue ethics and discard the pursuit of the knowledge of how the universe works. We have different viewpoints, different people. We have really interesting characters, people going to work for kings, people who work all night lifting water to pay for their life so they can afford to be a philosopher. Just very interesting individuals here, starting off this early Stoa. So please remember, you can support the show by going to patreon.com/SundayStoic. You can also join in and have conversations using our new forum on the Sunday Stoic webpage, SundayStoicPodcast.com. Thanks for listening to the show. Feel free to call in, ask questions. There's a voicemail thing. I can put you on the air if you want to say anything about Stoicism, how it's affecting your life. If you want to volunteer to do a reading or something, you can email me, and you can do a reading of Marcus Aurelius or something, so people can hear someone other than me on the show. Anything we can do to get you involved, I'm game. All right. I will catch you all later. Have a great week and carpe diem.
Thank you for listening to The Sunday Stoic. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review The Sunday Stoic on iTunes. Become a member of the Sunday Stoic team, earn rewards, and be an integral part of the show by becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/SundayStoic. Contact the show by emailing sundaystoic@gmail.com or by leaving a voicemail at 501-503-3132. To find out more, visit www.sundaystoicpodcast.com. And as Steve always says, Carpe diem.